Hey, welcome to another episode of Couchside Conversations, our Modearn by Morton YouTube channel, where we're having discussions that you have around the dinner table with your own families. And today we're going to dive into some employee benefits. I know, don't jump off your seat with excitement. I got Mike Rudow, wealth advisor, with me, and I'm Beau, Wirick. And we're going to get started with some questions for each other, right?
Yeah.
We have no idea what we're going to talk about.
Absolutely not.
Didn't coordinate.
No.
Wardrobe today.
Yeah. No, we look like a cookie when we sit next to each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Please, we could play Fur Elise, at least the first 5 notes of it.
No, I've been really excited to join this. I've seen your past episodes and they're amazing.
Yeah, and you're like, I could make these better.
I might have thought that, but I never said that.
Yeah, not out loud. Yeah. Okay.
No, but I'm guessing you got the bottle of wine.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. For the reward. Yeah. So let's get started with a couple questions. We're addressing 401ks, HSAs, equity as compensation, and then insurance today. So
yeah, all exciting topics, all that are top of mind for most people who are sitting out watching this.
It's usually like when I have to address these, when I take on a new job, I actually want to run away from the topic as much as possible because I'm confused, it's complicated.
And so I think that's what happens. I think most people do as far as like instead of digging into what the right decision is, they either don't make a decision or they just do what the people around them are doing. But I think, out of all of the employee benefits, the first thing that people think about is retirement planning, is 401k. And with that, we have an option now of, do I contribute to a traditional 401k or a Roth 401k? So maybe you want to start by empowering us with knowledge on the difference between the two.
So yeah, in the last few years, it's become a little bit more common for your employer to offer a traditional 401k or a Roth 401k. And so what's the difference between these two accounts? The traditional 401k, when you make a contribution, you get a current tax write-off. So if you make $100,000 a year and you contribute $10,000 to your traditional 401k, your taxable income gets reduced from 100 to 90. Whereas when you retire and you're able to take the money out of that account after it's been invested for all those years, then you have to pay taxes on it. So you're getting a benefit now, but you're going to eventually have to pay taxes on it in the future. With a Roth 401k, it's completely inverse. It's you have to pay taxes now on the full $100,000 salary. You make a contribution to your Roth 401k, and then it grows tax-free over time, and then you take the money out without paying taxes in the end. So the question is which one do I choose? What are the different benefits? And I think the biggest question to ask yourself is, do I think I'm going to pay a higher tax bracket now or a higher tax bracket when I'm in my retirement years? If you're 50, 60 years old, you're in the highest earning years of your life, you're in the 50% tax bracket. If you take federal and California and put them together, it's about 50%. You're probably in the highest tax bracket that you're going to be in. It might behoove you to take the tax benefit now and pay taxes later. But if you're younger and you think that maybe I'm in the 12 or 22% tax bracket, but taxes are going to go up between now and the time that I retire because of the federal debt levels, then it might be the better decision to pay the taxes now, contribute to your Roth 401k, and then don't pay taxes when you retire. Right. So hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. But do you think there are any other considerations when you're thinking about whether to contribute to a Roth 401k or building a traditional 401k that people could start to think about as far as planning perspective?
Yeah, so another thing to consider is just when you have a traditional 401k, when you reach a certain age, say 73, or if you're younger, then the age is now 75, the IRS requires you to start taking money out of this. So they require you to start to be taxed on it because you got the tax benefit early on. So those are called required minimum distributions. With a Roth 401k, you don't have those. So especially if you live quite a long time and you're not having to take money out of the account at age 73 or 74, 75, 76, all the way through your 90s, that money is able to grow tax-free the entire time. The other consideration is when you pass your traditional 401k or Roth 401k to your beneficiaries, you want to think about what their tax bracket's going to be. And so if you are, say, 90 years old by the time you pass away and your kids are in their 50s or 60s, they might be in their highest earning years by the time they receive the traditional 401k. And in that case, the law says currently that they have to withdraw the entire amount over a 10-year period. So you might be burdening them with a high tax burden by giving them a traditional 401k as an inheritance. With a Roth, you don't have any RMDs in your retired years, and you're going to pass this to your beneficiaries, likely in their high tax years, and they don't have to pay taxes on that, even though they have to take it over 10 years. So that's the high level planning that I would consider with Roth versus traditional.
I mean, that it sounds like if you're on the beneficiary side of it and you're inheriting something, inheriting a Roth is much more beneficial than inheriting a traditional 401k or IRA.
100%, because someone else did the work for you.
Yeah.
Thanks for paying the taxes.
No, I mean, I think those are good things to consider, right? Especially if you're thinking about legacy planning and longevity.
Yeah.
So we went over kind of the benefits of either contributing to a traditional 401k or a Roth 401k, maybe what the scenario is that would benefit you from doing one or the other. Are there any other things that we should consider with a 401k or a Roth 401k when making contributions?
Yeah, and another thing that a lot of people know, but they might have questions about is the employer match. How do I get my employer match? And so usually a 401k plan has some way that when you contribute to your 401k, your employer is also going to contribute up to a certain amount. It can be an automatic match. Say you don't contribute anything and your employer is just going to give you 3% of your salary no matter what. Well, you're going to get that regardless. Yeah. Other employers are going to have you have more skin in the game. They're going to say, if you contribute 1% of your salary to your 401k, then we'll match 1% of your salary. Again, using $100,000, you put in $1,000, they put in $1,000. I call it a 100% return on investment. It's free money right out of thin air. And so, but then that's capped at usually somewhere around 3 or 4% of your salary. If you contribute more than the maximum that they match, then there's no additional benefit with regard to them matching. There's still tax and estate planning benefits and investment benefits, but that match is usually limited to that 3 or 4% range. Another question that I get is, will they match if I contribute to a Roth 401k? And the answer is yes, they will. And it's going to be the match is always going to go to the traditional 401k because the employer is getting a write-off on it. So if you're maxing out your Roth 401k, this year it's a $23,000 max, then they're going to give that match to your traditional. So it's a way of diversifying your portfolio.
Yeah, if you want to start to build both buckets, right? So that you have both accumulating as you grow in your career, maybe understanding what the match is for your company and contributing some to your Roth, some to your traditional 401k, and then getting that match in the traditional 401k so both are continuing to grow. So it sounds like there could be some strategy with that and in building wealth in both buckets.
And we love it when we have clients who are approaching retirement who have IRA or traditional 401k money and Roth money, so that as they spend their investments, they can choose whether or not they're paying taxes on it. And there's a lot of strategic planning that can go into
as far as understanding what tax bracket we're going into and kind of controlling the tax environment as much as we can.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I've got some questions for you because I know that you're quite the expert on equity as compensation. And so this can take a few forms. It can be restricted stock units. It could be non-qualified stock options, incentivized stock options, employee stock purchasing plan. Let's just cover a couple of them. But can you just explain at a high level what's an RSU, a restricted stock unit, and how do you get paid and how you get taxed?
Yeah, I think a lot of young people in today's working environment are getting more than salaries, right? They're getting paid as equity as compensation, and understanding the differences between these things and how to plan around them is important when a lot of times they really don't know what they're receiving. So when you think of an RSU, a restricted stock unit, that is essentially them paying you salary in the form of shares of stock, right? And a lot of times how that happens is they'll give you a vesting schedule with a certain amount of shares. So say I have a 4-year vesting schedule and 1,000 shares. In year 1, I'm going to be awarded 250 shares of my company stock. In year 2, another 250 shares. In year 3, another 250. And year 4, that last 250.
And hopefully you're working for NVIDIA.
Right. and based on the fair market value of the share price, when I'm awarded that stock, that's essentially how much salary I'm getting. So if I have 250 shares and the stock is worth $20, I am receiving that as salary. So that is taxable income. I'm going to pay payroll taxes, Medicare, Social Security taxes on that. And what I have to plan for is I have the option now of either holding that stock, or when that stock vests, I can sell that stock and create income for myself. Either way, it is being taxed.
So if you sell it right away when it vests, it's almost it's the exact same thing as if you just received it as salary.
Exactly, because what they'll do is they'll withhold either the amount of shares to cover your withholding tax, or they're going to take withholding from the actual salary that they pay you, or they're going to sell those shares to then create the money to create withholding for you from the tax perspective. So it's no different than you receiving salary. You're just receiving it in the form of shares.
I could take salary and just go buy the stock in my brokerage account, and it would be the exact same result.
It would essentially be the event.
Right.
Yeah.
So then what is the benefit of not selling it right away? What happens?
Well, the consideration is now you have equity in the company. And if you think that your company is, is going to continue to appreciate, right? The company's growing, it's doing well. You now have the opportunity to grow those shares, right? So it's a way to accumulate more wealth. Where the risk comes in is concentration risk, right? How much equity do you have in your company, and how much risk is that presenting to you and your overall financial plan? So, when you're considering that, what I always ask people is like, well, should I keep my RSU as stock or should I convert it to cash? It's like, well, if you got paid that money in cash, would you turn around and buy that stock?
That's the right question to ask.
Right? And if the answer is, well, yeah, I love my company, I believe in my company, I think we're going to continue to do well, I don't own that much already, well, then maybe the answer is let's keep those shares and let those grow. If they already have a large concentration of that company's stock, let's identify the risk there, right? And so I usually tell people, like, look at your overall net worth, right, of your investable assets. And if your position in your company is over 10%, there better be good reason that you're holding more of that stock, and you better, more importantly, you should understand the risk that you're taking on by holding that large of a concentration, because not only is that a large part of your investable net worth, that's also where your salary is coming from. So if something were to happen to this company where they're doing layoffs, and maybe you're one of those layoffs, well, most likely if they're doing layoffs because the company is not performing well, the stock value is going to go down. You just lost your income. That's a lot of risk, all based on one company.
So, and when you lose your income and then you're forced to go sell that stock, and you might be forced to sell it at depressed value. Yeah, we just saw this week, we're filming this in a week that Salesforce just reported earnings, and not bad earnings, but it wasn't what people were expecting for future growth. And the stock was down 20% in a day.
Right.
Great company. And to think, if I had, say, 50% of my entire net worth in that company, and it lost 20%, well, I just lost a big amount of my net worth in one day. And what if I'm getting laid off at the same time? So that's the kind of conversation that we like to have with clients about, mitigating that type of exposure.
Yeah, absolutely. And then another form of equity as compensation, which is different, is a non-qualified stock option. And with the non-qualified stock option, you are not receiving shares. You are receiving the right to purchase shares. And how that works is you're going to have, basically, you're granted the rights to purchase a number of shares. And when you're granted those, you're going to have a vesting schedule similar to an RSU, where you might be granted 1,000 shares over 4 years. So they vest 250, every year. When your initial tranche of shares vest, now there's going to be a grant price that they granted you those shares at. So say those 250 shares vest and they granted you those shares at $30 a share. Well, you might go look, and when those vest and you have the availability to purchase those shares, the fair market value of that stock might be $60 a share.
So if I went just on the open market through my brokerage account and bought a share, I would have to pay $60. But since I have a non-qualified stock option, I'm only going to have to pay $30 to acquire this share.
Because that's what it was granted to me at, right? So from there, you've got a gap between $30 and $60. Now, if you decide to exercise your right to those options and purchase those shares, that gap between $30 and $60 is considered ordinary income. So you're going to pay ordinary income tax on that delta, right? Now, if you then sell the shares right away, there's no extended tax on that, right? Because you bought it at a valuation, you sold it at that valuation, so your only tax liability is going to be that ordinary income of that delta. Now, if you decide to buy and hold those shares, and then you hold it, anything above that would either be short-term or long-term capital gains, depending on how long you held it. If you sold it before a year, then it's going to be a short-term capital gain. If you wait a year longer, then it's going to be a long-term capital gain.
So anything, the difference between what I pay for it and what I would have to pay for it if it weren't an option, that gets taxed as ordinary income. Yeah. And then I hold the stock for less than a year. And if it gains anything from that starting point, that's going to be ordinary income. But if I hold it for more than a year, then it's going to be long-term capital gains on the growth of the stock from the time I acquire it. Yeah. It sounds pretty complicated, Mike.
It's important to understand the option and but also because there's a lot more that goes to it, because once it vests, you don't have to exercise that. You have usually up to 10 years to exercise your vested shares. So if your options vest and you're not in the money, if the fair market value of the stock is lower than the grant value, right, you're not going to want to exercise those shares. So you're going to want to sit back and wait until it's a favorable time to buy in. But there's also tax considerations because, like we just talked about, that's ordinary income. So if you're making a lot of income already and now you're vesting shares, that might push you into a higher tax bracket, right? And you might be paying more tax on those shares than you considered. So a lot of times what happens is then you sell enough shares to cover the taxes for that, and what you actually end up netting might be less than you thought. So it's important to understand all of the different variables that go into exercising these shares and when the right time is, right, to start to exercise and knowing that these shares are in the money.
And I think that's why we're having this conversation, because this is a great time to pick up the phone and call Mike Rudow.
Yeah.
You call your financial advisor and talk through your options.
Yeah, exactly.
No pun intended.
Look, I mean, most of these employees of these firms who are they're busy with the actual job that they have, and they might have a high level education on what's offered to them, but there's a lot of different variables that they need to consider. So approaching your financial advisor, having those conversations, understanding what's available to you, I think is really important. So let's do a lightning round for these last two. And when I think of lightning, I think the first thing that comes to mind is a health savings account.
Right, because
naturally,
if I get struck by lightning, I might have to pay some out-of-pocket medical expenses. So HSAs get a lot of questions on these. And the complexity with an HSA is that from a tax planning perspective, it's it's like the golden goose of tax planning. And the reason is because you get a deduction when you put money into it. So it actually reduces your taxable income. All of the money that you invest within an HSA grows tax-free. And then when you take the money out to use to pay either current or past medical expenses, once you're in retirement years, you don't get taxed on that money as long as it's used for a qualified medical expense. So that's a triple tax benefit, which as financial advisors, we flip out about. We're so excited about this. However, there's a couple of things to consider if you're going to qualify for it. You have to be enrolled in a high deductible health plan that qualifies for an HSA in order to qualify for it. So what that means is that the deductible that you pay on your medical bills, if you're a family, can be $3,200, a minimum of $3,200. So for instance, I used to, when I was an actor, I had the Screen Actors Guild health insurance, which is just wonderful. My deductible was $100. I would never go from that and take from that to get a $3,200 deductible just to enroll for an HSA. But now that I don't have that, as long as I'm not going to the doctor a lot and I don't have a lot of medical bills, it might make sense to save on taxes because I'm not going to have those savings offset by higher out-of-pocket medical expenses. Right. High level, it's usually beneficial to do an HSA if you don't go to the doctor a lot. Yeah. And if you go to the doctor a lot, it's probably not the best idea. Yeah. But you can do some analysis with your financial advisor to see if it's a good idea for you.
And just to understand that as an option, because I think most people don't even know that option's available to them. And if they have it available, they don't really know what the benefit of it could be. And I think one consideration is, look, a lot of people are looking to put away as much tax-deferred income as possible, right? They're looking to build up those tax-deferred savings accounts for the future. And if they're maxing out their current 401k and they don't have the ability to, defer any more income, this is another bucket that they could start to fill, and it can start to grow to be something considerable in the future. And like you said, in the future, when they're at retirement age, they could reimburse themselves for medical expenses and pull that out and not having to pay any taxes on that when they didn't pay any taxes on it going in.
Right.
That's pretty incredible. You don't have any other account like that.
No, it's the only one. But keep your receipts.
Keep your receipts, right?
The moral of the story.
Right.
Okay, last lightning round. We want to talk about the most fun topic, which is death and disability.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. So, I mean, I talk about it every day.
Well, you must be a really
Do you want
rosy,
my job?
bright- Okay, so your employer oftentimes will give you a life insurance policy option, a disability policy option. What are some of the considerations that you should think about as an employee before enrolling in those?
Yeah. Like everything, every situation is different, right? It all depends on who you are, what your family needs are, how many dependents you have, how important is your income to your dependents. But I think the first consideration is understanding that if you are on a policy that your employer is providing, know who's paying for that policy, right? Because if it's your employer who's paying for the policy to protect you, well, then any of the benefits that are coming to you are going to be taxable. So if it's a life insurance policy to your beneficiaries that the employer is paying and you pass away, that is considered taxable income to your beneficiaries. If it's a disability policy, that's going to replace some of your income if you have a disability event that your employer is covering, that's going to be taxable income to you. Whereas if you're taking it from your pocket and paying for those policies, right, that is going to be tax-free income to you if it's a disability policy, or it's going to be tax-free lump sum to your beneficiaries if something were to happen.
It's pretty interesting to think about. You pay, let's call it $50 a month into your insurance policy. But if you end up using it, the benefits that you get are in the tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, tax-free or not tax-free. That's a pretty big change.
Especially with the
who's paying
taxes
premium.
that we have now.
Yeah.
Another consideration too is portability, right? If you're with an employer and you're on a group policy, and God forbid something happens that you leave that company, you get fired, you get like, oh, you might not be protected anymore because that plan might not be portable. Right. You might not be able to bring your insurance with you. So you're leaving yourself exposed. Whereas if you have a private policy, one that you purchase from a provider yourself, doesn't matter who you're working for, you are protecting yourself and that can go with you anyway. So I think it's important to plan to understand, okay, how important is one, my income to my family? Do I have a spouse that has an income that could cover our non-discretionary spending? If I do, then maybe disability is not as important. If I don't, disability insurance is very important to make sure my family is protected, right? From a life insurance policy, take a look at your liabilities, right? If you have a spouse and children and you have a large mortgage, you might want to have a large insurance policy that would be able to pay off that mortgage so that, that's less stress on your spouse if something were to happen to you and that you no longer have that income. Her bills or his bills are much less. What are your kids' age? Are they going to be going to college soon? What does it cost to, for their quality of living every year? And so understanding what an insurance policy would need to look like to be able to address those things.
Yeah, find that magic number of what would I need to replace my income if something happened to me,
right?
In order to take care of my family. And from there, you can look at your options and see, is what my employer is offering me, is that enough? Or do I need to supplement it with something outside?
Yeah.
Is it too expensive to go through my employer? Would it be cheaper to go outside or vice versa?
Exactly. So understand what your options are through your employer and then be able to supplement that with personal plans.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the more we know, the better position we're in, right? Yeah. And so taking some time to plan that out, to identify what your options are, to identify what your needs are outside of that, and then pulling together a plan to make sure that you're covered.
The plan is pick up the phone and call Mike Rudow,
obviously,
as we've established, right? All right, as always, we like to end these conversations with a this or that round where, we've talked about high level, but now you have to answer from your personal perspective, Mike. So, you can't outsource this to your, you can't hide from this. All right, so first question, Roth or traditional 401k?
That's a hard one because I'm a, let's do both.
Oh.
But if I had to pick one, I would say Roth. And the reason I'd say Roth is, look at the environment we're in, the amount of debt we have as a country and the deficit that we're spending. I don't think taxes are going to go down in the future. I think if anything, they're probably have a good probability of going up.
Yeah.
So if I can, one, have the ability to put away money that eventually is going to be non-taxable when I pull it out, and if my kids inherit it, they're going to have a much better account to inherit than a traditional IRA, that's great. And two, I think that because taxes are going up, I would rather pay the taxes now than eventually pay them when
It hurts though. I mean,
It
we live
does
in
hurt,
California.
yeah.
We have to pay
And
federal and state.
that's why I started with I would do
Yeah.
both,
Right.
but if I have to pick one, I think with the direction that I think taxes are going, I would go with the Roth.
Okay. Well said.
Now for you, high deductible health plan with an HSA or low deductible health plan, no HSA.
I'm so conflicted on this. Right now, I'm using a high deductible plan with an HSA, and I'm considering stopping because I'm doing the math. And I think, I go to the doctor I see a mark on my arm. I'm like, what is this? What is this? Tell me what's
haven't been to
going
the
on.
doctor in 14 years, but yeah.
So if I were in your shoes, easy. But for me, I think I just have too much of a relationship with the medical industry to justify the cost at this point. So I think I'm going to go off the high deductible health plan.
Okay.
So, okay, final question for you. Would you rather have your employer worry about all of your benefits, or would you rather take care of it yourself?
I'm in the boat of take control of things that you can. And that means I'm going to take care of it myself. I want to identify what my family needs if I were gone. And I want to make sure that I have those policies in place, regardless of whom I'm working for.
Yeah.
And
okay.
anything that I get through my employer, I look at as a bonus, right? I think that is extra benefit that my family can have if something were to happen to me, or if it's extra benefit that me and my family can have if it is a disability event that just means I need to replace income. So.
That's a great answer. I think we've come to the right conclusions today. The conclusions are pick up the phone, call Mike Rudow. If you have any questions, you probably have a bunch of messages waiting for you right now.
I heard my phone ringing, which threw off my rhythm a couple times during this.
That's what happened. Got it.
So
okay.
if I said anything that seemed odd, it was just because my phone was
distracted.
ringing and I was distracted.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Couchside Conversations. Join us for the next one.
Wow.